when did you start in real estate? What was your catalyst for getting started? What motivated you? What were you doing before this? And what did you do to get started? So what was your catalyst, and how did you get started? And some of you may have answered this in the beginning, but just touch on it quickly.
So 14 years ago, my oldest son who lives in Greensboro, he invited Jeannie and I to a real estate seminar. And so Lou Brown was up from Atlanta and he was speaking there. And so we thought, well, we need to do something to supplement our retirement money. And what could we do? Well, I'd already been a builder, so I had experience in real estate. I didn't want to start a restaurant. There's other things you could do, so I thought, well, real estate investing. So we got started. We went to Atlanta for a long weekend, and became a student with Lou Brown. And I guess that's how we got started. So that was 14 years ago. Does that answer all of them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I started a lot longer than that. In 1974, when I was in college, I was also working as a labor union consultant and actually negotiated a national contract with a federal agency. While I was in negotiations for 6 months, the labor union picked up all of my tab, my salary, all per diem, all travel, all lodging, all the meals, everything. No withholdings whatsoever. I doubled my salary in that 6-month period with no tax withholdings. And I learned at a very early age that if you don't pay Uncle Sam or know how to not pay Uncle Sam, you're gonna owe a lot of money. And I consulted with a lot of my fraternity brothers and sisters on, well, how do I not pay these taxes? And they said, it's too late. You already made the money. You gotta pay the piper. It just so happened Money Magazine had an article about 3 investors who paid very, very little taxes. Each one was a millionaire. And they had their stories of how they used real estate to do investing, but also learning the tax code, how not to pay the maximum amount of taxes, but to pay the minimum amount. And I've kind of started using that as my springboard, and I started off wrong because I didn't have the knowledge about the creative ways of doing real estate. I went out and bought an apartment, a condo type arrangement, paid market price for it, put a renter in there, and I was clearing $50 to $100 a month. I thought it was all great. Oh, this is easy. First vacancy killed all the profit. So I learned that no, that's not the right quite way to do it. And I've just kind of over the years started figuring out ways of how to get the highest yield that I want with the least amount of work and the least amount of taxes. And right now I capitalize on 401ks with Roth IRAs and things like that. I don't have to pay income tax. I spent 10 years with no income tax payment whatsoever. But everything I had was being sheltered. But since then, I retired, and now I have to get out on my own, take this money to fund up a lifestyle. So I'm back paying taxes again, but I'm also looking at ways of minimizing the amount of taxes paid.
Thanks, Jim. I agree with you on the knowledge part. So I think I'll talk about my catalyst. I think you know that I started as a home stager. So my father was very wealthy. My father was a multimillionaire. And when he married my mom, they traveled all over the world. He's lived everywhere, so I moved a lot. I think what struck me was that my father was not very wise with his money, and I learned that much later. My sister got very sick with cancer when she was 14 years old, and she battled it for 4 years. And I watched just his businesses and his money being depleted, traveling all over the world to try to save her life. I realized after she passed away at 18 years old that money's not gonna do it. Money's not gonna save anybody. And it's really about the people. and money just shows up. My father ended up broke. And I was in my 30s when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, because I was not taught to learn about how money works for you. What does that mean? My parents would always say, oh, they have a lot of money. I wonder what they do. And now I'm like, oh, if I could go back and say, it's not what they do. It's how they allow their money to work for them. And it comes from the knowledge. So my catalyst was I did not want my family to go through what we went through, and after my father just had nothing. It was very challenging when he got sick. He passed away of Parkinson's dementia, and it was to watch that and not be able to support himself or us be able to get him, because we didn't have private, he was in Egypt, so we didn't have the private American health care that I could provide for him. So my catalyst is I want to be able to allow my money to work for me. Real estate has been wonderful in sales. It's the most expensive thing that you can capture in sales. But now I'm in a space which is wonderful, and so I'm so excited to be here to learn from all of you of how to allow my investments to grow and the creativity behind it.
Well, you'll know my story, because broke. I think he left the room, but back in the back, Juan Merritt was sitting there. Him and I were working at a company, and he was the one saying, he was sitting next to me, he said, let's do real estate because we were both broke, that broke. We had enough cash to make a gas payment to drive together to work. Yeah, he drove, and I sat in the next seat and paid him a little bit of cash to make it to work. But I started, when he said, let's go into real estate, I started listening to every single podcast from BRRRR. So I studied for the first year. Again, I worked 6 to 3, from 3 to 10. I would sit behind my computer and do real estate. My wife never saw me. That's also why we're still married. But anyway, true story. So I studied, I did all of that, and then I, you just have to go out there. You just fail forward, fail hard, have nothing to fall back on. Because if you don't have that, like I had nothing to fall back on, like, yeah, a poor life, so whatever. You just go. And I saw this property in Durham, 2503. I had it yesterday. I did a presentation in Raleigh for a group like this size. And I showed 2503 Ash Street, first property we bought for $50,000. I still own it. Today's 102 worth. Did nothing to it. And that's how we got started. It's just doing something. And my catalyst is that I will, once you've been there in a very bad situation and you know for sure you don't want to go back there ever again, you will do everything you can to never go back there. You will work countless hours. I worked 80 hours a week to never go back there again. So that's my story.
So to tackle what Erik is saying is basically once you start climbing, don't look down. So don't look down that ladder because you don't want to go back down. I was a sophomore in college at Winston-Salem State University, and but I also worked a full-time job. I was a project manager for a textbook buyback company called Bell Tower Books out of Bridgeport, Pennsylvania. And my commission check was about $40,000. I said, I'm going to buy a house and a car. I bought a house, and the reason for buying that house was I didn't want to go to the mall and spend all my money because I go buy a polo shirt and it spill a little bleach on it and it's ruined. I can ride past this house and I still own it. It's in Meadowbrook. Mike knows it well. On Bedford Road, Beverly Road, 1912 Beverly Road is my first house I bought in 2011. And I still own it to this day. I bought it for $150. It's worth $150,000 now.